So if you would love to have two hot hatches in your household and you want them to be complementary, so different, and one of your hot hatches is already the car that I also drive now, the Suzuki Swift Sport Hybrid zc33s edition, and you want something that is different, but you love the practicality of a hot hatch, that you can still fold down the rear seats and you can seat up to 5 people, perhaps also 5 doors. For me, I would rather go a power station hot hatch combination, because a power station gives you a lot more room in addition and is bigger at seats, but you still have that playful hot hatch to begin with. But nevertheless, if that is what you're looking for, I would go for a BMW 130i. So an older type of car, that's different, this is more of a newer type of car. But there are also a lot of other differences that are completely opposite to the Swift Sport. The one thing that's a drawback is that if you also want to have the gearbox different, there are BMWs with automatics, but normally they do not come with the 130i of that generation, because then at that time point automatic was not classified as sporting. So if you also want to have a different engagement there, and if, for example, want flippers on your steering wheel and automatic, a very good compromise could be the Golf R32 or the Audi A3 with the same engine, 3.2 liter, also atmospheric. So let's begin with the 130i versus the Suzuki Swift Sport. Normally enthusiasts will go for stage 1. Stage 1 will not have so much effect with the 130i, but will really make a big difference with the Swift Sport. Why? Because Swift Sport has a turbo engine, so you are not only to optimize with the ECU tune, the electronic injection of your fuel, but also the amount of air that comes in, because you can increase the turbo pressure. The turbo will work harder, spool faster, gives more pressure, more bar of air in, and then you also have that factor. So you can optimize both fuel and air, and thereby you can also increase the fuel ratio a lot higher. If the fuel ratio will still be stable compared to the air ratio, but because the air ratio can be increased that much, you can also increase the fuel again. So that makes the total amount of fuel to be ejected that you can use higher than with an atmospheric engine. With the atmospheric engine you will get some horsepower gains, often between 5 and 10%. 10% is quite generous, unless it is down-tuned. So for example, Mazda has some cars with a 2-liter atmospheric engine that are down-tuned, or 1.5 that are down-tuned and come in different flavors. So the same engine but just electronically limited, and then of course you can release a lot more horsepower to your engine. Torque also, even if it's limited, you cannot increase it to a high degree in atmospheric engine. Whereas with a turbo engine you could, for example, go from 235 Nm to 300 Nm in this car, only by the engine alone. Next to that, that being said, that's normally, I think, the best way to compare hot hatches, because stage 1 is often performed also oftentimes to do a little bit on the exhaust side or the air intake side. So first we start with the engine. The engine is placed in this direction in the Swift, it's placed in this longitudinal the next direction in the BMW. And why is that? It's the second point. The engine drives the front wheels with the Swift, so it can directly transfer the engine to the wheels, but in the 130i it drives the rear wheels, so it has to be converted from this direction to a cardan axle that transfers the power to the rear wheels, and then it has to be shifted again to propel the rear wheels in this direction. So that's the reason for the placement of that engine in the other direction. And that also means that the bonnet of the 130i needs to be a lot longer to make place for this engine configuration. Next to that, I already mentioned it, the Swift Sport is turbocharged. The 130i is naturally aspirated, so it's just the 130i is sucking in the air, whereas the Swift Sport, the air is being blown in, it's forced in. So it's forced air being fed, force fed air. Also, the Swift Sport comes with an additional engine, so it has two engines. The 130i has, like most cars, only one engine. The second engine of the Swift Sport is an electro engine. It produces 14 horsepower and 53 newton meters of torque, so that's an addition, which really makes it altogether quite a torque beast, because it's also very, very light. Then the engine displacement, so the 130i has more than double the displacement, so the Swift has 1.4 liters of engine displacement, and 130i has 3 liters of engine displacement, so there's more than double. And also it comes with a different type of cylinder configuration. And why is that? The Swift Sport has only 4 cylinders, and the 130i adds 2 cylinders to make it a total of 6 cylinders. So quite a different type of setting. Both are in line. You could also have a different configuration in form, like that Golf R32 or that Audi A3, which has it in VR configuration, so very compact V6, so to say, which can be placed in a similar style and thereby has benefits as a normal line 4 cylinder, for example. Very compact, very nice piece of engineering as well. So that makes it quite a difference already in the engine compartment. But also, if you look at the rear wheel drive of the 130i, it gives it the feeling of being pushed, whereas the front wheel drive of the Swift Sport makes it being pulled. You are being pulled by that engine. So it's a different type of setting. The benefit of rear wheel drive is on the hard acceleration. You will, especially from a standstill where traction might be an issue. So for example, if you do a launch, then when you accelerate, the front is lifted a little bit, so that gives you less traction on the front wheel drive. And then with a rear wheel drive, because then you will lift also the front, but you will put more pressure on the rear, and there is where you want to have the traction, so that's a benefit. Also in turns, a 130i has more of an oversteering tendency, whereas so it will tuck into the corner a little bit exaggerated, whereas the Swift Sport has more the tendency to understeer. And why is that? Because it is being pulled, and you also have to steer with the same wheels that are putting the power on the road. So if you put down the accelerator with the 130i and the rear wheel drive, you will get a little bit of this effect. And when you put down the accelerator with the Swift Sport, the curve you will have trouble to keep the apex, so the ideal line, because you will be pulled towards the outside, whereas with the rear wheel drive you will pull a little bit more to the inside. Also for drifting this can be beneficial, if that's your thing. But there needs to be some things to put into consideration. And why is that? Because the Swift Sport is a front wheel drive, so a lot more simplicity, so a lot less components, a lot less additional length of the bonnet. So the bonnet can be shorter, the overall dimension of the car can be shorter, and still you keep the practical nature, that you still have quite a lot of room that you can use. You also don't have that cardan axle going to the compartment, and also in the trunk you don't have that additional bulk, because there is normally the drive shafts for rear wheel drives that put the power that is generated on the front to the back. Also you will lose a lot more, so still not a lot, but because of that longer distance and more friction, you will lose a little bit of power. So the power generated at the engine, you will lose a bit more from the engine to the wheels, and also you will lose a little bit of fuel economy for the same reasons, because you lose a little bit of power, but also you have a little bit more friction to all those additional components. All those additional components will also add mass, which also will sap a little bit of the performance and frugality of the engine again. So all in all, you need a heavier car, a bigger car, and a more powerful car to match the sports front-wheel drive setup. So that also, all those components make it less playful in the corners. So therefore, I'm an advocate for a hot hatch. Get it front-wheel drive, because that's the best configuration if you don't have excessive power, which normally is not the game of the hot hatch, more of the hyper hatch, and then you have oftentimes all-wheel drive, so that's not a problem at all. So those are a little bit of the components to take into consideration. Still, the 130i is also delivered as a 5-door like this, so you have similar practicality. There will be cars that are even more different. For example, the engine also plays in the midst, like Clio V6, also 3-liter naturally aspirated engine. But that car loses the hot hatch practicality, because it's just like a 2-seat coupe, like an Alpine A110, more modern version, because you lose the entire rear seat, and you also will lose a lot of the hot hatchback practicality, so there's not much left, and therefore I excluded that one. Also, there were cars like that also have a big naturally aspirated 6-cylinder in V configuration, which is different. I already mentioned the VR configuration, but that still has all-wheel drive, it's different. But you also have cars like Alfa Romeo 147 GTA with a 3.2-liter V6 naturally aspirated, a dual to behold, so that would be a difference. If you look on the hood, you see all those chromy pipes, which is nice if you really have the Busso variety still, but that's still front-wheel drive. It comes also with automatic, so that could be a benefit with flippers on the wheel, but you can also have that with Golf R32 or the Audi A3. So there are some things to consider there. Also, you could look at a more sedan shape that is still a hatchback. For example, my second car was a Civic made by Honda, the Honda Civic 1.8 VTI. So it's a dog VTEC, as they call it, naturally aspirated. It's very high revving. It has a limited slip differential, which is Suzuki Sport does not have. So there would also be a benefit. It's naturally aspirated, limited slip differential, and high revving. So those will be the different parts. And that's sedan shape. So 4 things different. But still, the sedan shape is just there for the looks, because if you open it, you still have the practicality of a full hatchback. Because it is a hatchback, it's 5-door hatchback. So that could be considered, but that's still front-wheel drive, still manual. Also only 5 gears, this one comes with 6 gears, so still a little bit of difference there. Also not a hybrid, whereas this has a hybrid. So there are many more that you could consider. You could also consider a very heavy type of hot hatch, if you would like. So for example, AMG A45S is more of the hyper region and also quite heavy. You could also go with an electric engine, but the electric engine doesn't fare that well with hot hatch. You could, because oftentimes they are not that light, but for example you could look at an Albert Albert 595 Albert 595 electric, for example, or Mini Cooper electric, that could be considered. There's also an automatic, because it is an electric engine, works the best there. So that could be considered still front-wheel drive, but those are quite heavy because you need a battery. Not as heavy as the A45S or RS3, especially the Albert is not that heavy. But still, there's something to consider. You could also go with the diesel way, but with a hot hatch to be a diesel, normally you also have a turbo in place, and normal diesel hot hatch are still 4 cylinders, so therefore I did not use them. For example, BMW 120D or 125D comes in a 4 cylinder, but also a turbo. This is not so different as an naturally aspirated, so also quite torquey, low revving, quite the same as the CS Sport that you mentioned. You also have some hot hatch diesels from other brands. They are very limited. You have Seat Leon FR 1.9 TDI, but that is only 150 horsepower, and that's heavier than the smaller sibling that they have, Seat Ibiza Cupra D, with 160 horsepower and a lighter body shell, so that would be the preferable one. And you have also a nephew of that, the Fabia RS, the first generation, came with a 1.9 TDI 130 horsepower engine. So things to consider, but still front wheel drive, still manual, and still turbo. So that is the reason why I disqualified those cars in this sense. But yeah, there are different type of hot hatches altogether, I will admit that. And the 120D and the 125D still have all the differences with rear wheel drive, etc. But a smaller engine. If they had like a 130D, that might be different, because then you still have a 6-cylinder, but the turbo would be there. And the question is a naturally aspirated engine compared to a turbo engine, both gasoline sipping, more different than a diesel sipping turbo diesel engine compared to a turbo gasoline sipping engine. It depends a lot on the engines being compared, of course. So that's something to take into consideration. Hope you liked this short video. It's quite long, I must say, but it's nice for hot hatch enthusiasts if you would want to go this route. I did not. I did have two hot hatches at one time. One was the Abarth 595 Turismo with MTA, so the automatic with the flippers on the steering wheel, and the convertible roof, so the convertible of that was a very nice car. It's really a hot hatch because the trunk could only be opened like a sedan, but still you could also top load it, so you have a lot of practicality still in place. And then I had recently, I replaced that with a coupe convertible with an aluminium rooftop. It's now a Haas Kopen, which is light and still than this little car. The Abarth was heavier. Another car that I had similar as hot hatches, I once had the Daihatsu Serion that was being replaced by a Honda. At one time I had a Suzuki Ignis Sport, like the ancestor, the original Sport. In the Japan market it was called the Swift, original Swift Sport, so to say. And I also had an AX Citroën AX GTI. So that was the most I had at one time. Funny enough, I also had another Ignis Sport that would go to a friend of mine at the time, but still the same car as the other one, so that would not count. Wishing you a great day. Foundry Car out.